Alrighty. Well, welcome everybody. There's a lot of familiar faces in here, a lot of new faces as well. So my name is Kerry. Again, I am the RD here. I went to Illinois State University and I got my bachelor's in nutrition. And I worked with quite a few athletes when I was doing my program there. So I worked in the sports nutrition department. So I worked with football, baseball, basketball, women's basketball, women's track. So pretty much all over the board. And I realized that every single athlete shares one thing in common, and that's that they don't eat enough food or they don't know much about nutrition. And it's just unfortunate because we don't ever really receive that education as an athlete of, what you need to be doing. It's like train like this, show up to practice, do this, do that, but they never really teach you the back end stuff that is like actually going to make you the best athlete you can be. After I graduated from that program, I moved here to Colorado. I'm from Chicago area. And then I did my graduate at University of Northern Colorado, where I did my dietetic internship, and then I became a dietitian. Throughout my career here, I've been at Pursuit for 6 years since day one. And I've worked with a lot of different clients. But I do specifically like working with the athletes as well because it's just a little bit different of a ball game where we have a different outcome that we're trying to achieve, and it's performance, right? And with the athletes, there's so much room for improvement in what they're currently doing. So that's kind of what I hope you guys get out of this today is where do you have those opportunities for changes and how can we start to bridge that gap? Before I start, does anybody have any questions that they want to be answered? Sometimes it helps just kind of guide the conversation a little bit. Or anything they're curious about? Okay, well, if you have questions along the way, just holler out. But without further ado, we'll jump right in. So one of my favorite quotes is, training is the gas pedal and nutrition is the fuel. You can be just, pedal to the metal, flooring it, but if you don't have any gas in the tank, you're not going to go anywhere. So training can only get you so far, but nutrition is really what's going to drive the performance and drive the result that you guys are after. So nutrition can help make a good athlete great and a great athlete unstoppable. So don't worry about this fine print unless you're super, super close. It's hard to read it. But I liked this visual just to kind of outline how we think about nutrition. And this is congruent with how we coach just our normal lifestyle clients or general population. But the problem is most people, they have a priority problem where they want to flip this triangle upside down. And they want to do, what supplements can I take to make me better? What diet should I do, or whatever have you. So the most important thing is we are building a solid foundation, and that's how much energy do we have coming in? How many calories are we actually eating? And then we kind of go up from there. So you have to master each subsequent layer before you get to the top. So a lot of people try to major in the minors instead of really getting those big rocks in place first. So my goal is for you guys to essentially get the big rocks in place and stop stressing about the little pebbles. One question that I always ask when I sit down with athletes is, what does a typical day of eating look like for you? And sometimes the parents are there and they're like, oh my God, they eat a ton. And it's well, what does that mean, right? And a lot of times after I go through the whole assessment process, I realize that they're really not eating as much as they think, but because, they skip breakfast, and then they eat, maybe a kind of a big lunch. It's different sometimes during the school year too, or if you have off campus, people will, bring lunch, or they'll go out to eat and get a couple cheeseburgers and fries, and they'll eat a lot at that one meal. And then maybe they'll snack on a couple things, and then at dinner time, whatever my mom makes. So what it actually looks like is this. You're constantly fueling all day long, and so sometimes it's kind of annoying because you feel oh my God, I'm always eating. But if you're an athlete, you're just burning through that energy, and we need to be constantly replenishing it so we have the energy to do what we're trying to accomplish. Does this look familiar to anybody? Moms? But that's, the one thing that I notice is there's a big skew in what we think we're doing, right? That's why in this next step, I'm going to have you guys actually track your food. So this is going to be a little bit more interactive, so it's not just me babbling on up here. So Joe had you guys download the app MyFitnessPal. We're going to go through this exercise of just everything you ate yesterday. I want you to put it into the tracker. So I'll give you guys some time to do that. But we're going to use this information throughout the rest of the presentation. And if there's anything you guys don't know how to track, you can always just ask me or just do your best. And then in step 3, I want you guys to write down the calories. And if you don't know how to get to that screen, I'll show you calories, protein, carbs, and fat. So if you guys aren't done yet, just keep going. But we're going to use this information as we go to the next activity. So now we're going to calculate our theoretical calories. So this is how many calories we should be consuming. So I know it's a little bit of math. I know you guys didn't think you were coming to math class, but if you are a dude, you're going to use the top calculation, and if you are a lady, you're going to use the bottom one. So basically when we're calculating calories, this very first one, this is our basal metabolic rates, how many calories you burn before you do any activity. So it's just what you need to keep your body alive, to keep the lights on. So we're going to get that baseline factor, and then we're going to multiply it by our activity factor. So this is how active you are as an athlete. So if you can't read those, let me know. I can just let you know what they are. But then this is going to get us our calories. So when you guys are all done, we will go to the next step. Most of you guys are going to be moderately active, or if you're training 2 times a day, extremely active. Okay, so I promise the next part is not as much math as confusing. But basically, this first number here, this is your basal metabolics, how many calories you need to keep you alive. So Brady's, for example, we just calculated it. He needs just over 2,000 calories just to keep his body functioning. So that's before training, before doing really anything. Yeah, so if he's to lay in bed all day, if he's to be in a coma, he needs 2,000 calories to keep him alive. So then we need to multiply it by how much you're training. So if we're training, 5 times a week, we need to multiply it by 1.7. If we're training more, training less, that number is going to change. But this is going to tell us how many calories we need to eat every single day. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you still need time, we can come back, but I want to move on. So next we're going to calculate the macros. So our macros is where our calories come from. So there's protein, carbs, and fats. And protein and carbs specifically, most important for athletes. So I want you to calculate each of those. So for your protein range, it's going to take whatever your body weight is in pounds and times it by 0.8 and then 1.2. So it'll give you a range. Write that number down. And then you're going to do the same thing for fats, so times 0.5 and times 0.75. And then for the carbs, so this is going to just depend on how frequently you're training. So most people are going to be, probably between 5 to 6 hours a week and 7 to 10. Could be more, could be less, actually. But for carbs, the basic range, we can just use this as 6 to 10. So for this carbs, I forgot to change it to pounds. So you're going to have to use your kilogram weight. The other ones are in pounds, but the brain wasn't fully working this morning. I forgot to say, the men is on the left, women's on the right. Okay. So it's about half. Okay, we all good? Okay, so now I want you guys to compare those numbers. So where were your calories at from the FitnessPal, and where were your calories at when you calculated with the equation? 3 out of 4 athletes consume less fuel than they actually need. So if we're consuming less, our calories are important for obviously performance, but also recovery and how our brain functions and a lot of other things in the body. So if you were one of the 4 that were eating properly, how much advantage would you have on everybody else on the court or on the field? Because for most athletes your age, they don't have the beauty of having nutrition education. So it's if you can get that dialed in, you have a leg up on people. Only 32% of female and 19% of male athletes eat enough protein. Protein is probably the most under-eaten macronutrient because it's just not as readily available as things like carbs, you know, to the gas station and there's donuts and all that good stuff. Only 81% of female and 90% of male athletes do not meet their carbohydrate requirements. And like as an athlete, carbs are your main fuel source. It's what your body thrives on. And so if we are not supplying our body with enough, like we're not giving our like systems the resources they need to perform. So when we're under fueling, this is a long list, not an extensive list of the things that happen. So we're not going to recover. If we're not recovering, so when you're training in the gym, you're breaking down your muscle tissue. If you are not giving your body the building blocks it needs to recover, it's just going to stay in that catabolic state. And then we're more prone to injury or like decrease in our muscle mass. And difficulty concentrating, mental fatigue, so on and so forth. I think probably the last two are going to speak the most to you guys because that's what you're focused on. How high can I jump? How fast can I run? How much can I lift? So on and so forth. So if we're not putting in the right gas, we're not going to get those things. So how much is enough? This is just a recap of kind of the calculations we did, but for calories, this is like a very general range, right? But it's, you know, everybody is an individual, but this is like a general recommendation. So like 23 to 26 calories per pound of body weight. If we are, you know, extremely active, that might go higher. If we're trying to put on muscle, that might go higher. Protein, 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. Carbs, and then our healthy fats. So I stole this from this coach that Joe follows. He calls it the 5-5-3-2 method. It's just a very easy way to think about your nutrition as an athlete. So 5 meals a day, 50% of that coming from carbohydrates, 30% from protein, and 20% from fats. So our body can only utilize about 25 to 40 grams for this process called muscle protein synthesis. That's how we build muscle. So that's like the sweet spot for that. So if we divide that up over 5 meals a day and we are constantly having food coming in like about every 3 hours, that's what's going to be the best for optimal performance. Any questions on this? Okay. So the picture gives you kind of a breakdown of like what each of those meals should contain. Okay, so if you want to take a picture of this one, go for it. So this is eating around competition or training. So just outlining what macronutrients are most important and when. So we want to make sure around training time specifically that we are eating enough protein to maintain like a constant influx of amino acids and carbohydrates to provide our body with energy. So I gave some examples of just what those things would be. So meal one, I could have like a pretty balanced breakfast if my training or my comp's later in the day. And it doesn't, I need to get as more detailed until later on, but just like a ham and cheese omelet. So I'm getting my protein, some fats with that, the oatmeal for carbs, and some orange juice. Meal two, you can have a grilled chicken sandwich, pre-workout, chicken and white rice. So we want to have before our workout, before our competition, we want to have like quick digesting carbohydrates, things that are going to like digest through your body very fast. So that way it's providing our body with those like sugars that it needs to perform. So things like white rice, Sour Patch Kids, gummy worms, dried fruit, fruit juice, Gatorade. And then same thing afterwards. And then your final meal is just kind of the same, or just like a balance of all three. So this is a graphic. It's called the Human Performance Model. And so there's different keys to it. So we already talked about nutrition, mental preparation. I'm not really going to go into, but that kind of goes along with a lot of this stuff where it's like our focus and how we, you know, how our cognitive function is going. Conditioning would be through your training, and then hydration we're going to talk about. But sleep is the number one thing that I want to hit on, or I think I talk about hydration first. So again, most people don't drink enough water either because they just don't think about it, right? If you don't have, like a lot of you don't have a water bottle with you or on your desk. So if it's not right in front of us, like out of sight, out of mind. So just a 2% dehydration of your body will decrease your performance. So things like muscle cramps, muscle weakness, confusion, fatigue, all those things that we don't want. So I wrote just some recommendations for what does adequate hydration look like around our training time. So what should we be doing before? What should we be doing during, and what should we be doing afterwards? General rec would be just like a minimum of your half your body weight in ounces. Of course, if you sweat a lot or you live in like a tropical climate, which none of us do, but you'd probably want to have more. A good way to gauge your hydration status is the color of your pee. So if your pee is like a light lemonade color, that means you're hydrated. If we are just waiting to drink water till we are thirsty, like thirst is already a sign that you're already dehydrated. So want to make sure that we're just staying on top of that. And the last thing is sleep. So sleep is the first domino of performance. It is where we recover, and it's basically where the magic happens, where if we are not sleeping enough, we're not recovering, we are not going to perform well, we're not going to have a good stress response and everything else on the list. So if I could really like drill one thing into your brains is how important sleep is, and Joe can probably talk on it too. Like it is, even if you're not an athlete, like sleep is key for everything. They did like a study on, I think it was driving. Maybe it was like something with driving, and for every hour that people lost sleep, like the increase of car accidents went up. And then they had I listened to this podcast on it was like athletic performance and sleep. And it was like reaction time, obviously strength decreases quite a bit. So it's like that is like, if we're staying up all night playing video games and watching Netflix or whatever you guys do, and you have training the next day or like, a game, like probably not the best idea. So trying to, I know it's easier said than done, especially like some of you guys are like 14, 15, 16, probably 18 years old. But really trying to keep sleep consistent. Same time, like going to bed around the same time, waking up at the same time. And it's just a good habit to get into as you just grow into adulthood, because most adults don't sleep enough either. So really take sleep seriously. It's one of the number one reasons why athletes don't eat enough, is because they're worried about gaining fat, or just they want to lose weight, one of the two, especially women. And so I can't remember, I want to say it was like 60-something% of athletes do not eat enough because of that exact reason. But you have to remember, like, you have a different goal, right? If you're an athlete, your job is to perform. And you probably will not gain a ton of body fat. Your body is going to use that up, right? So it's not going to be just extra energy floating around.
A lot of the times, if your body's getting that fuel, you might even get leaner.
Yeah. Garrett is a good example. He's not here, but I work with Garrett, and I think you guys all probably know him. I worked with Brady as well. But when I think he was under eating by quite a bit. Yeah, 1,000 or something calories. And in a month, he just kind of just shredded out. And it's crazy, but it is sometimes the more you eat, your body starts to recognize, like, we have food coming in, and it will get leaner because you're able to build muscle and you're able to perform properly. So, because if you're under eating, your body is just gonna, even if you don't realize it, like subconsciously, your body is going to be doing everything it can to conserve, and you're not going to be putting as much effort in as you think you are. So it's like you can always eat less, right? But what's the harm in trying to eat more and seeing what happens? So, alrighty, that's all I got. If you guys have questions or anything, you can book a consult with me. So I do athlete plans, or basically map out their entire eating schedule and what that looks like. Or if you just want to chit chat and have questions, you can scan that and set up a consult with me. Yeah, I'm not a big supplement person. There's like baseline stuff that I do usually recommend. Number one is creatine. So creatine's like the most widely researched supplement on the planet. And it's pretty cheap too. But it basically, what it does is it helps with like muscle endurance and muscle recovery. So you're able to like push harder during your workouts, and just increases like that turnover of energy. So that's number one. Second thing is fish oil. So I know a lot of teens don't really love fish. But if we're not getting enough fish oil, or if we're not getting enough fish intake, I recommend an omega-3, like a fish oil. Like I want to say it's like 1 to 2 grams a day. And just make sure you do your research on supplements. There's a lot of shitty ones out there. If you have questions, you can always ask me. And then the third one is vitamin D. So if you don't spend a lot of time in the sunlight, I know a lot of you guys are athletes, so you are outside, but if you're an indoor athlete, vitamin D, not a huge multivitamin proponent, because if you're getting a varied diet, you don't really need it.